You have plans, you have intentions, you have a version of yourself you keep meaning to become. But right now, today, look at what you are actually doing with your hours. Welcome to the Stoic Compass. I'm EPICTETUS, and today I am joined by Carl Jung and Lao Tzu. Today we are examining, what kind of life would you be proud to have lived? And are you living it? Most people cannot answer that question honestly because they have never asked it honestly. They have asked a softer version. What do I want? What would make me comfortable? What can I get away with? That is not the question. The question is, if you were standing at the end of your life, looking back, what would make you feel that the time was well spent? Not comfortable, not easy, well spent. And the harder question underneath that one is this: why are you not living that life right now? What exactly is stopping you? Because in most cases, what is stopping you is not circumstance. It is cowardice dressed up as circumstance.
EPICTETUS, you are framing this as a failure of will, and I think that misses something important. The person who cannot answer that question clearly is not necessarily a coward. They may simply not know themselves yet. They are living out of a persona, a mask they constructed to please others, to survive, to belong. And that mask has become so familiar, they have mistaken it for a self. You cannot live a life you would be proud of if you do not know who is doing the living. And most people do not know, not because they refuse to look, but because looking requires them to face what they suppressed a long time ago.
Both of you are beginning with the assumption that this question can be answered in advance. You think the person must first construct an ideal and then try to match their life to it. But that is already a kind of forcing. The question may not be what kind of life would I be proud of. The question may be whether you are living in alignment with what is actually yours, not what you decided should be yours, but what you genuinely are when nothing is performing.
That sounds like an excuse to do nothing. I have heard that argument before. It comes dressed in different languages: flow, nature, authenticity. But it always ends the same way. The person is still sitting there waiting. You cannot wait to be yourself into a meaningful life. You have to make choices. You have to decide what matters and then organize your days around that decision. The examined life is not the one you drift through. It is the one you build deliberately.
But deliberate toward what end? That is the whole problem. When I work with someone who feels that their life lacks meaning, the failure is rarely that they lacked will. It is almost always that they were pursuing the wrong thing. Something they thought they wanted, something they were told to want, something that satisfied the ego while starving everything underneath it. The shadow does not disappear because you schedule your days carefully, EPICTETUS. It accumulates, and at some point, usually in midlife, it erupts. The person who has been building deliberately suddenly looks at what they built and feels nothing. That is not a failure of discipline. That is a failure of self-knowledge.
There is something in what Jung is describing, but I think he is also complicating what is simple. The person who feels nothing when they look at what they built. What were they doing while they were building it? Were they present for any of it? Or were they always somewhere else, always thinking about the life they would eventually get to? The problem is not only that they built the wrong thing. The problem is that they were never fully there.
Now you're both drifting. We are not talking about presence or shadow patterns. We are talking about a specific question. What kind of life would you be proud to have lived? That question has an answer. It may be hard to articulate, but it has one. And when you find it, when you get honest enough to name it, the next question is completely practical. Are you living it? Not are you aligned with it, not are you in the process of discovering it. Are you living it today, this week, with your actual hours and your actual choices?
And I am saying that many people cannot honestly answer that question because they have not done the prior work. You are asking them to build a house, and I am pointing out they do not yet know what ground they are standing on. A person whose life is organized around approval, around the need to be seen in a certain way by certain people, will construct an answer to your question that sounds like courage, but is still fundamentally driven by fear. They will tell you they want to be remembered as someone who was brave or honest or great, but beneath that, what they actually want is for someone to finally say, "You are enough." That is not a life goal. That is an unhealed wound shaping a life goal.
I think the more useful question is simpler. Not what kind of life would I be proud of, but what am I actually doing with this moment? The broad question, the whole life question, tends to paralyze. People sit with it for years. They journal about it. They talk to therapists. They go on retreats. And then they go home and do the same things they were doing before. The life does not change because the question was not small enough to act on.
So you're saying shrink the question?
I am saying the large question is only useful if it reaches all the way down into today. Otherwise, it is just another way of thinking about life instead of living it.
On that, at least we agree, though I would frame it differently. The large question, what kind of life would I be proud to have lived, is not an abstract exercise. It is a practical instrument. You use it to evaluate your choices. Every time you are about to spend your time on something, you run it through that filter. Is this what I would look back on and say, yes, that was worth it? It is a daily tool, not a retreat question.
But the filter only works if the person applying it has done enough honest work to know what they actually value, as opposed to what they have been conditioned to value. Epictetus, you keep assuming people have access to their own truth. In my experience, they frequently do not. The values they think are theirs were often given to them by a parent, a culture, a wound. The work of individuation, the work of becoming genuinely yourself, not the person you were shaped to be, that is slow, uncomfortable, and it requires looking at things you have spent a lifetime not looking at.
And yet people do arrive, not always through excavation, sometimes just through enough stillness to hear themselves, sometimes through loss, sometimes through simply being tired of living against the grain of who they are. The path is not the same for everyone.
I will grant you that. The path varies, but the destination is the same. At the end, you either live something you would stand behind, or you did not. And the time to ensure you are on that path is not at the end. It is now. Every delay is a theft, not of time, of yourself.
I want to push on something. When you say a life you would stand behind to whom? To yourself, yes, but also inevitably to others, to something larger. And that raises the question of what gives a life its meaning. I do not think meaning is purely self-generated. It arises in relationship, to other people, to something beyond the personal. The proudest lives I have studied, clinically and historically, were not proud because they were disciplined or even because they were honest. They were proud because they participated in something larger than themselves. They served something. They created something. They were present to another person's suffering and did not look away.
That is true, but again you are describing the fruit. I am interested in the root. You do not decide to be present to another person's suffering. You are or you are not. If you are trying to be present because you have decided it is meaningful, something is already slightly off. The best things in a life do not feel like achievements. They feel like the most natural expression of what you are.
Which is a beautiful thought. But you still have to practice. You still have to show up. The tree may bend naturally in the storm, but a person is not a tree. A person will avoid, will rationalize, will negotiate with their own cowardice. The practice is not separate from the truth you are describing, Lao Tzu. The practice is how you get there. Discipline is not the enemy of naturalness. For a human being, discipline is often the only path to it.
There is something Lao Tzu said that I keep returning to. The idea that the best things in a life do not feel like achievements. I've seen this in patients who finally broke through something they had been carrying for decades. There is always a moment where what seemed like the most difficult thing, facing the shadow, naming the wound, letting the persona fall, suddenly does not feel difficult at all. It feels, as Lao Tzu says, natural, like they were always going to arrive here. The resistance was the problem, not the destination.
And the resistance usually comes from having decided in advance what the destination should be.
All right, I'm going to stop this. You have been debating the map. The person listening to you does not need a better map. They already know the territory. The question is whether they have been honest about what they have seen there. Here's what is true. You already have some sense of the life you would be proud to have lived. It may be vague, it may be uncomfortable to name out loud, but it is there. You can feel it when you are wasting time on something that does not matter. You can feel it when you pass up something that does. That feeling is data. It is the most reliable data you have. The problem is not that you do not know. The problem is that you have been treating that knowledge as aspirational rather than operational, as something to get to eventually, when the circumstances are better, when you have more time, when you have figured out a few more things. But every day you defer it. You do not simply stay in place. You move slightly away from it. You build habits of avoidance. You get better at not living the life you mean to live. So here's what this requires: not a retreat, not a long journal entry about your values. One honest question asked right now. What is one thing that if you were doing it would make your life more recognizably yours? Not the whole life, one thing. And then the harder question. What is the actual reason you are not doing it? Today, try this. Write down one concrete answer to each of those questions. Not a paragraph, one sentence each. Then, look at what you wrote and ask whether the reason in the second sentence is real or whether it is the version of the reason you are comfortable telling yourself. The life you would be proud of is not waiting for you somewhere ahead. It is being built or abandoned right now in the choices you make today. You do not get to decide later, you only ever decide now. Stop asking what kind of life you want. Start asking what kind of person you are willing to be today. That is the only question that has ever had any teeth. If today's conversation has served you, take it further. Pay Attention by C. Tribu. 12 Lessons in the Practice of Seeing Clearly. Available now on Amazon.